So what's really going on with frozen shoulder? Frozen shoulder is usually explained as adhesive capsulitis. And the standard explanation is this: the capsule around the shoulder joint gets inflamed, thickened, tight, and sticky. So the shoulder loses motion. And technically, that's true, but I think that explanation is only describing what we see at the end of the process. Doesn't really explain why the body would do that in the first place. Because here's the deeper question: why would your body take one of the most mobile joints you have, a joint designed to reach and rotate and throw and lift and carry and hug and express, and suddenly decide to lock it down? That's the part that's really interesting to me, because I don't think frozen shoulder is just a shoulder that got tight. I think frozen shoulder is a shoulder that your nervous system decided to protect. And over time, that protection became structural. In other words, frozen shoulder may start as a threat response, but eventually that threat response turns into actual tissue change. The body almost builds a cast from the inside. Not because it's dumb, not because it made a mistake, but because some part of the system decided motion here is not safe. And once the body decides that, it starts organizing around protection. So the muscles begin to guard. The nervous system becomes more sensitive. The person usually starts avoiding certain movements. Their shoulder blade starts moving differently. The ribs and the neck start helping more than they should. The person may sleep poorly because every position just hurts. Every way they try to get is uncomfortable. They just stop doing stuff. They stop reaching for things. They stop using the arm normally. And slowly, the shoulder becomes smaller and smaller in the brain's map. Then the biology follows the behavior. The capsule thickens, the tissue stiffens, the inflammation changes, the collagen in the shoulder joint remodels, and now what began as protection has become a physical restriction. That's why I don't love the idea of just attacking frozen shoulder with aggressive stretching. Because when you force a frozen shoulder, you're not just stretching tight tissue, you may be arguing with a protection program. And if the nervous system still believes that motion is dangerous, more force is not the answer. Sometimes more force just confirms the threat. The body says, see, this is exactly why I was protecting this area. So instead of asking, how do we rip this shoulder open? I think the better question is, how do we teach this system that motion is safe again? That changes the entire approach, because now the goal is not just range of motion, the goal is safety. The goal is trust. The goal is to give the shoulder enough movement to remind the system what it can do, but not so much that the body has to defend against it. And this is where frozen shoulder really becomes interesting, because the shoulder may be where the problem shows up, but it may not be the whole source of the problem. Frozen shoulder is often connected with bigger systemic patterns: blood sugar issues, diabetes, thyroid problems, inflammation, stress physiology, sleep disruption, a body that's already living in a more guarded, reactive state. So sometimes the shoulder is not just having a local problem, sometimes the shoulder is expressing a whole body environment that is more prone to protection, inflammation, and fibrosis. That doesn't mean that it's just all in your head, though. That's not what I'm saying at all. The pain is real. The stiffness, it's real. The capsule changes are real, but the body is not a machine with isolated parts. The shoulder lives inside of a nervous system. It lives inside of an immune system and a metabolic system. It lives inside the person's stress, sleep positions, breathing, posture, and movement. So if we only treat the shoulder as a stuck hinge, we may miss the larger story. A better way to explain frozen shoulder to a patient might be this. Your body has a built-in protective cast around the shoulder. Our job is not to rip the cast off. Our job is to help the body realize that it doesn't need the cast anymore. That means in the early painful stage, we usually don't want to be overly aggressive. We want to calm the system down. We want small, comfortable motion. We want gentle isometrics. We want the shoulder blade moving again. We want the ribs and breath involved. We want the neck to stop guarding. We want the patient to feel some version of, oh, I can move this a little bit and nothing bad happens. That is a powerful signal because once the body starts to believe that motion is safe, the rules start to change. Then later, when the pain has calmed down and the shoulder is more in the stiff phase, we can start asking for more motion, longer holds, gentle stretching, joint mobilization, strengthening, controlled loading. But even then, the goal is not to dominate the shoulder. The goal is to renegotiate with it. You are trying to earn range back, not steal it. That's a big difference. And then eventually, in the what I'll call the thawing phase of this frozen shoulder metaphor, the goal really becomes integration. Not just can you get your arm higher, but can you reach without fear? Can you carry something? Can your shoulder blade, ribs, neck, and arm work together again? Can the shoulder return to being part of normal life instead of this protected, isolated area? That's the real healing process. So when I look at frozen shoulder, I don't just see adhesions. I don't see a tight capsule. I see a body that chose immobilization as a solution. And that leads to a much better question. Why did this person's nervous system decide that freezing the shoulder was necessary? Was it an injury? Was it a period of stress? Did they have a surgery or an immobilization? Did they have blood sugar problems or thyroid issues? Was it just inflammation? Was it months or years of guarding and compensation? Was it a nervous system that had already been living too close to survival mode? See, the answer is not always obvious, but the question matters because frozen shoulder is not just part of a mobility problem. It is a protection problem that became a mobility problem. And if we understand that, we can approach it with a lot more intelligence, less force, more respect, more precision, and more patience. And ironically, when the body feels less attacked, it often becomes more willing to let go. So the big idea is this. Frozen shoulder is not just something to stretch. It is something to understand. The shoulder is not your enemy. Your stiffness, it's not just random. Your body is trying to protect you. But now it may be protecting you from a threat that's no longer there. And healing is the process of helping the body update that information to say, we're safe now. You don't have to hold this so tightly anymore. You can move again. That's the deeper work with frozen shoulder. Not just breaking adhesions, not just forcing range of motion, but teaching the system that it's safe to thaw out from the ice of the frozen shoulder.